thinking about adoption of Bitcoin, what or other cryptocurrencies, what specific?
Do you want to make money from Bitcoin? Get our best guides. We have 5 guides for you. See link on description. Download is 100% free. Click now.
Specifically within maybe the next like 5 to 10 years are the barriers you see to getting people to use it? Obviously complexity is one that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the future, we can pay for things with our face, and that'd be cool.
Well, again, it depends on what you mean people use it. And one of the fundamental problems we have is that in hindsight, you can see how a technology plays out and how people chose to use it. That wasn't the design people had. I challenge you to go back and look at sci-fi from the 60s and 70s. And what they envisioned future computers to be were these giant mechanical brains that lived in enormous cabinets, right, that could solve primarily problems of logic, right? Even Star Trek, even some of the most advanced sci-fi programs out there, right? They had the idea of the communicator and maybe even the idea of video conferencing. Do you know what they missed? They missed the idea of a 14-year-old being a world-acclaimed blogger. They missed the shift from authority of centralized sources to the democratization of publishing, where one person at the right time with the right device can become a part of history just by being there. They missed the idea of viral. They missed the idea of meme. They missed all of the things that rolled out of the internet. And the reason they missed them is because nobody needed that. There's this apocryphal story that says that Henry Ford said, if you asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Right? The problem is if you ask people what they want Bitcoin to do for them, they're like, I want to be able to buy a cup of coffee, because that's what money does for them today. They don't imagine themselves being able to have a device that does arbitrage between different markets. They don't imagine using micropayments to accelerate their progress through an HOV lane on an autonomous driving vehicle that is negotiating lane access with the car next to it and making micro Satoshi payments in a millisecond. They don't imagine building solar systems on their house that are not connected to the grid, but instead where they're selling microbursts of electricity to passing smartphone users through wireless charging stations. They don't imagine any of these things because none of these things are possible. So when you say, what is it going to be like to use these technologies, we have to realize that one of the things that really disruptive technologies do is they take previously existing categories, smash them together, and build things at the join that didn't exist. We couldn't imagine most of the things that happen over the internet because they couldn't exist. And so things like Bitcoin are going to change our very conception of what a payment is. Today, we imagine money primarily as a batch function, meaning that you pay a chunk of money for a chunk of service at a determined period in time. I've talked a lot about the concept of streaming money, which is breaking down that barrier so that you could do micropayments in microseconds to the point where the quantum nature of money switches into a wave, a flow. And now you start thinking of, I'm earning my salary by the second, meaning that as I work through the month, every second that passes, a tiny trickle of money flows into my wallet. And simultaneously, I'm buying other services. I get into an Uber, and I buy 1.6 minutes of insurance for that ride. By streaming 1,600 milliseconds worth, or 16,000 milliseconds worth of money to the insurance company for the precise duration that I was in that car. Now, when you start thinking of breaking down the concepts of time, you realize that we haven't even imagined the applications. One of the key things to understand about Bitcoin is what we use it today for, what Venezuelans use it for. and what Americans might use it for in 10 years are two completely different things, or 10 completely different things. And we can't possibly fathom what they're going to be like. I was at a conference recently, and they showed me one of the old clocks in the center of town that had been financed by private money. And I was thinking about the nature of clocks. What most people don't realize is that the Industrial Revolution didn't just change our ability to tell time, it changed our very understanding of what time was. Until that time, if you wanted to meet someone, you'd say, let's meet at noonish, at midday in the square. And that literally meant plus or minus an hour. Because the concept of a minute wasn't something you couldn't measure. It was something you couldn't fathom. It didn't exist as a concept. Industrialization moved us into thinking about minutes and seconds. What happens when we do that to money? What happens when we change payments to micropayments and then nanopayments and do them on a scale of nanoseconds? We don't know these applications. We will never know what they are. So what does it mean for it to become mainstream? It means to create applications that were previously impossible to do for people who didn't know they needed them until they discovered that they could do something new.
Do you want to make money from Bitcoin? Get our best guides. We have 5 guides for you. See link on description. Download is 100% free. Click now.